Chapter 4: A Demon in the Midst of Hell. After days of wandering aimlessly through the ruins of the Hive City, Kael finally accepted a cold truth he had long tried to avoid. No one could survive alone for very long in this hell, no matter how tough or agile they were. Hunger, disease, roaming gangs, and the warped creatures spilling up from the city's lower levels, all of them were patient teeth waiting to tear apart the most isolated prey. And so, in a moment that was not quite a choice, Kael joined another group of survivors, not out of trust, but because his survival instinct forced him to cling to anything that still moved. The group was not large, just over a dozen people, but each carried eyes in which some part of their humanity had already died. They sheltered in the collapsed core of an old manufacturing district, where toppled industrial machines formed natural caverns, sealed enough to avoid bombardment and dark enough to conceal atrocities. The leader was a middle-aged man named Varric, his voice roughened by smoke and his eyes constantly appraising others like commodities to be traded. He did not ask where Kael came from, nor did he care what Kael had lost. The only thing that mattered to him was whether Kael was strong enough to survive and ruthless enough not to drag the whole group into the grave. At first, Kael was given only menial tasks: standing guard, scavenging supplies, dragging the bodies of the unlucky away from the shelter so the stench would not attract predators. But it did not take long for him to realize that here, the line between life and death was not drawn by physical strength, but by how willing one was to do something more horrific than the next person. When another group of refugees wandered in begging for water and food, it was Varric who first ordered the gates sealed and left them to starve outside, and it was Kael who was assigned to stand watch, listening to the weak knocking that dragged on until it finally stopped. That night, Kael did not sleep. He sat with his back against the freezing wall, listening to the breathing of those still alive, and for the first time in his life, he understood that mercy no longer had a place in this world. In the days that followed, Varric's group began to hunt actively. They set traps along underground routes, broadcast false signals to lure other survivors in, then stripped them of anything useful. Kael, who initially only watched, was gradually pushed into the heart of these raids because he was fast, silent, and possessed eyes cold enough not to hesitate when it was time to strike. He learned how to stab from behind, how to incapacitate someone by smashing their trachea, how to ignore pleading voices, because if he stopped, the next one to fall might be him. Once, during a failed ambush, a boy no older than 14 was badly wounded, lying amid the rubble, eyes wide with fear and pain. Most of the group had already withdrawn, only Kael remained behind to gather supplies. The boy reached out and grabbed Kael's pant leg, his voice hoarse with dust and blood. In that instant, the memory of Kael's younger sister surfaced, her dust-smeared face, her crooked smile just before everything was swallowed by fire. Kael froze, his heart tightening, and then he pried the boy's hand away. He did not kill him, but he did not save him either. He turned his back, leaving behind the ragged breathing as it slowly faded into silence. That night, Kael retched in a dark corner for a long time. But the next morning, he still rose, strapped his weapons on, and continued on with the group. Bit by bit, a cold shell formed around him, thickening with every death he witnessed, every betrayal, and every time he convinced himself that he had no other choice. Varric noticed the change quickly and began assigning Kael more ruthless tasks, acting as bait to draw creatures out of their nests, feigning injury to lure other groups into revealing themselves, even disposing of weaker members of their own group when supplies ran low. Kael did all of it because he understood one simple truth. In this world, those who hesitated died first. And then, during a particularly bloody ambush, when the group surrounded and slaughtered an armed band of refugees, Kael realized that he no longer felt disgust. His hands were steady, his breathing calm, his mind empty like a frozen lake. When it was over, he stood among the corpses, blood coating his hands, and felt that something inside him had vanished, though he could no longer tell what it was. That night, sitting alone by a weak fire, Kael stared at hands that had once trembled with fear and now held only calluses and silence. He understood that he had crossed a line from which there was no return, and that from this moment on, he was no longer someone who merely wanted to survive. he had become part of this hell.